The stars stretched endlessly beyond the viewport of the UNSS Prometheus as Commander Sarah. Chen stood with her hands clasped behind her back, watching the massive structure of the Galactic Assembly Station grow larger with each passing moment. For 300 years, humanity had dreamed of this day. Ever since the first crude warp drive had carried small probe beyond the heliopause and into the vast darkness between stars, now Earth was finally ready to take its place among the galactic community. To join the 47 spacefaring species that had governed interstellar politics for thousands of years, Sarah felt the weight of 6 billion people resting on her shoulders behind her. 17 of Earth's finest minds and diplomats prepared for what would be the most important meeting in human history. Dar James Martinez checked his presentation tablets for the 100th time, his nervous energy filling the small briefing room. Lieutenant Yuki Tanaka stood guard at the door, her military bearing impeccable despite the tension that filled the air commander. "We're receiving docking clearance from the station," the ship's AI announced in its calm, measured tone. Sarah turned from the viewport and addressed her team with a confidence she didn't entirely feel. "This is it. Everyone," she said quietly, "remember, we're here to prove that humanity deserves a seat at the table, that we're ready to contribute to galactic civilization." The docking procedure took nearly an hour as the Prometheus was guided through multiple security checkpoints. In scanning stations, Sarah noticed that their ship was being treated with far more scrutiny than other vessels arriving at the station. It was their first hint that not everyone welcomed humanity's arrival when they finally stepped onto the station proper. The sheer scale of it took their breath away. The main concourse stretched 4 kilometers in every direction, filled with beings of every imaginable shape and size. Creatures that resembled crystalline trees conversed with quadrupedal beings covered in iridescent scales. Floating jellyfish-like entities drifted past. Towering insectoid warriors. The air thrummed with 1,000 different languages being translated in real time by the station's sophisticated Systems A delegation of assembly. Officials waited to greet them, led by a tall, angular being with silver skin and forearms. "I am Coordinator Velshin," the being said through a translator device. "Welcome to the Galactic Assembly." Representatives of Earth. The formal greeting was polite but cold, and Sarah noticed how several other species stopped to stare at the human delegation with expressions that ranged from curiosity to open disdain. Over the next several days, Sarah and her team were subjected to a bewildering array of meetings, cultural exchanges, and what could only be described as tests. They were questioned about Earth's history, its conflicts, its technological development, and its social structures. Every answer was scrutinized. Every cultural practice examined. Dar Martinez presented humanity's achievements in art, music, literature, and philosophy. He showed them the works of Shakespeare and Tolstoy, played recordings of Mozart and Coltrane, displayed images of the Sistine Chapel and the Taj Mahal. Lieutenant Tanaka demonstrated human physical capabilities and explained Earth's diverse ecosystems. Engineer Chino, relation to the commander, walked them through humanity's technological innovations, from the printing press to quantum computing. But the more they shared, the more Sarah sensed a growing disapproval among the assembly members. Came to a head during the formal presentation to the High Council, the governing body of the Galactic Assembly. The chamber was enormous, with seats arranged in concentric circles rising up toward a domed ceiling that displayed a real-time map of known space. Representatives from all 47 member species attended, and the gallery was packed with observers from countless other civilizations. Sarah stood at the center podium, her voice steady as she made humanity's case for membership. "We come before you not as conquerors or supplicants, but as fellow travelers in this vast cosmos." She began. "Humanity has spent the last 3 centuries reaching for the stars, driven by an insatiable curiosity about our place in the universe and a deep desire to connect with other intelligent life." She spoke of Earth's diversity, its resilience, and its commitment to growth and learning. She acknowledged humanity's violent past, but emphasized how far they had come, how they had united their world and ended their most destructive conflicts. For a moment, she thought she saw understanding in some of the assembled faces. Then Ambassador Cathril of the Shanti hierarchy rose to speak. The Shanti were one of the founding species of the assembly, Ancient and powerful, with a civilization spanning 10,000 years, Threll was massive. Easily 3 meters tall, with deep purple skin covered in intricate patterns that denoted his high rank, his voice boomed across the chamber, even without technological amplification. "This is absurd," Cathrall declared, his words dripping with contempt. "We are being asked to admit a species that only achieved spaceflight 287 cycles ago. A species that was using primitive chemical propulsion less than 300 cycles past." He gestured dismissively towards Sarah and her team. "The Shanti required 3 million cycles to develop interstellar capability. The proper time for a civilization to mature and evolve beyond its base instincts. Yet these creatures expect us to believe they are ready in mere moments of cosmic time." Murmurs of agreement rippled through portions of the assembly. "Look at their history," Cathrall continued. "Warming to his subject even now, they maintain separate governments on their homeworld, squabble over resources and ideologies, and their popular entertainment glorifies violence and conflict." Sarah felt her jaw tighten, but maintained her composure. "With respect, every species here has faced similar challenges in their development," she said firmly. "The question is not whether we have struggled, but whether we have learned and grown from those struggles. Have you?" Cathrall shot back. "Your species still maintains military forces, still produces weapons of mass destruction, still cannot agree on basic principles of governance. We maintain our defense forces precisely because we understand the universe can be dangerous." Sarah replied, "We produce advanced technology because innovation drives us forward. And we maintain diverse governments because we value different perspectives and approaches to solving problems." The debate raged for hours, with various species weighing in on both sides. Some like the Velic Confederation and the Morantine Collective, spoke in favor of giving humanity a chance. Others echoed Cathrall's concerns about admitting such a young and potentially volatile species. Finally, the High Council called for deliberation. Sarah and her team were escorted to a waiting chamber while the council debated behind closed doors. "That could have gone better," Martinez said quietly. His earlier optimism deflated. "They're afraid of us," Lieutenant Tanaka observed. "Did you see how Cathrall kept emphasizing our military capabilities?" Sarah nodded slowly. "They see us as unpredictable, dangerous, primitive," she said, "but we knew this wouldn't be easy after nearly 6 hours." They were summoned back to the council chamber. The head of the High Council, an ancient being called the Eternal Scholar, spoke in a voice that seemed to resonate from multiple directions at once. "The High Council has reached a decision regarding humanity's petition for membership. In the Galactic Assembly, it announced, we recognize that Earth has achieved remarkable technological advancement. In a relatively brief period, however, concerns remain about your species' readiness for full integration into galactic society." Sarah's heart sank, but she kept her expression neutral. "Therefore, we offer the following arrangement. Humanity will be granted provisional membership in the Galactic Assembly, subject to a probationary period of 10 standard cycles." Relief flooded through Sarah. "Until the Eternal Scholar continued, however, your delegation will remain aboard this station as cultural liaisons during this probationary period. You will serve as representatives of your species and as guarantors of Earth's good behavior." The word hostages hung unspoken in the air. Sarah exchanged glances with her team. This wasn't what they had hoped for, but it was an opening, a chance to prove themselves. "We accept the Council's terms," Sarah said clearly. "Humanity thanks the Galactic Assembly for this opportunity." As they were escorted to their new quarters aboard the massive station, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they had just walked into a trap, but they had come too far to turn back. North was counting on them to make this work. No matter what it took, she just hoped that trust and diplomacy would be enough to bridge the vast gulf between humanity and the rest of the Galaxian. The shadows of the council chamber. Ambassador Cathrall watched the human delegation depart with cold calculation in his ancient eyes. Everything was proceeding exactly as he had planned. 6 months passed like sand through an hourglass, and with each passing day, Commander Sarah Chen understood more clearly the true nature of the Galactic assembly, the grand ideals of cooperation and mutual advancement were nothing more than a beautiful lie covering in ugly truths. The assembly was not a democracy or even a meritocracy. It was a carefully constructed hierarchy designed to keep the powerful species in control and the younger civilizations perpetually subservient. Sarah discovered this through countless interactions with representatives from mid-tier and younger species who would speak candidly only in private, away from the ever-present monitoring systems. The Velic Confederation, who had spoken in humanity's favor during the initial hearing, had been trying to negotiate better trade terms for 3 decades without success. The Marantine Collective, despite having developed revolutionary medical technology, were forbidden from marketing it to species above a certain tier without paying crushing licensing fees to the founding members. Every resource, every trade route, every colonization right was controlled by ancient treaties that the founding species refused to renegotiate. It was feudalism on a galactic scale. Wrapped in the language of civilization and order, Sarah shared these revelations with her team during their increasingly rare private moments. "We're not liaisons," Dr. Martinez said bitterly during one such meeting. "We're propaganda pieces. They parade us around to show the younger species what happens when you follow the rules. Worse than that," Lieutenant Tonica added, "we're leverage. As long as we're here, Earth has to play nice." But Sarah refused to give in to despair. If the system was corrupt, then she would work to change it from within. She began building alliances with the oppressed species. Carefully and quietly, the Velic ambassador, a being named Throck who resembled a bipedal bear covered in azure fur, became a close confidant. "Your people remind me of mine when we first joined the assembly," Throck told her one evening over drinks in a neutral quarter of the station. "We thought we were entering a partnership. Instead, we found ourselves in a gilded cage. Then help us change it," Sarah urged. "Together, our voices would carry more weight." "You don't understand how deep this goes," Throck replied, his voice heavy with centuries of frustration. "The founding species have been doing this for millennia. They've refined the art of control to perfection. Any species that pushes too hard finds themselves facing economic sanctions, trade embargoes, or worse. What could be worse?" Sarah asked. Kethrock looked at her with sad, ancient eyes. "Asked the Krell Commonwealth. Except you can't, because they don't exist anymore. They tried to form an independent trade coalition 50 years ago. What happened to them? The Assembly declared them pirates and authorized a military intervention. Their homeworld is now administered by the Shanti as a protectorate." Sarah felt ice form in her stomach, despite the risks. She pressed forward with her plan. She worked with Throck and sympathetic members of other species to draft a proposal for reforming the Assembly's trade regulations. It was modest, carefully worded to avoid direct confrontation with the founding species, but it would open up opportunities for younger civilizations to develop economically. She presented it to the Economic Council, a subsidiary body of the High Assembly Ambassador, Cathrell, who sat on that council, dismissed it without even reading the full document. "These matters are far too complex for such a young species to understand," he said with that particular condescension Sarah had come to loathe. But Sarah noticed something in his eyes, not just disdain, but fear. She had touched a nerve. 3 weeks later, Sarah received a private communication from Throck, wanted to meet in one of the station's commercial districts. In a crowded marketplace where conversations could be lost in the general noise. When she arrived, Throck's usual jovial demeanor was gone, replaced by barely concealed anxiety. "You need to stop what you're doing," he said without preamble. "I received a formal warning from the High Council. If I continue associating with your delegation, the Velic Confederation will face economic review. They're threatening you because of a trade proposal." Sarah asked, incredulous. "Not because of the proposal," Throck said, "because you're making the younger species hope. Hope is dangerous to the established order, and they've decided to make an example. An example of what? Of you." Before Sarah could press for details, Throck departed quickly. Looking over his shoulder as if expecting pursuit, Sarah reported the conversation to her team, and they agreed to be more cautious. But it was already too late. 2 days later, Commander Sarah Chen and her entire delegation were arrested by Assembly security forces. The charges, when they were finally presented, were staggering in their scope and absurdity: espionage, conspiracy to commit economic terrorism, unauthorized communication with member species, theft of proprietary technological data, and incitement to rebellion. These charges are completely fabricated. Sarah protested to the security officer processing them. You will have an opportunity to present your defense at tribunal, the officer replied. Mechanically, the tribunal was held in a sealed chamber with no observers from non-founding species. Permitted to attend the panel consisted of 5 judges, all from founding species, with Ambassador Cathrell serving as the primary prosecutor, though. Evidence presented against them was a masterwork of falsification, recorded conversations that had been edited to change their meaning, fabricated documents supposedly showing humanity was stealing military secrets, testimony from anonymous witnesses who claimed the human delegation had been recruiting species for an armed rebellion, where Martinez stood and objected repeatedly, his legal training from Earth crying out at the violations of due process. Where are these anonymous witnesses? He demanded. Why can't we cross-examine them? How can we defend against accusations we cannot properly address? The witnesses fear retaliation. Cathrell replied smoothly, their identities must be protected for their safety. This is a mockery of justice, Sarah said, her voice ringing through the chamber. You've already decided our guilt. This tribunal is just theater to justify what you've already planned. Cathrell turned to face her directly, and in that moment his mask of civility slipped entirely. You are correct, Commander Chen, he said coldly. This is not about justice. It is about order. Your species has been in space for less than 3 centuries. Yet you presume to lecture civilizations millions of years old about how we should govern ourselves? We presume to believe that all species deserve fair treatment. Sarah shot back that younger civilizations shouldn't be exploited by older ones. If that's revolutionary thinking, then your civilization is built on tyranny. Such arrogance, Cathrell said, shaking his head. This is precisely why humanity is not ready for galactic society. You lack the wisdom that comes with age, the understanding that some must lead and others must follow. The tribunal deliberated for exactly 17 minutes, barely long enough to be considered proper procedure, when the judges returned. Their verdict was unanimous: guilty on all charges. The sentence was pronounced by the head judge, a Shanti elder whose voice crackled with age, for the crimes of espionage and conspiracy against the Galactic Assembly. The human delegation is hereby sentenced to dissolution. The sentence will be carried out immediately and broadcast to all member species as a demonstration of the consequences of betraying the Assembly's trust. Sarah's blood ran cold. She knew what dissolution meant, though. Shanti had used it for millennia, as their ultimate punishment. It was a molecular disintegration process that could be calibrated to take hours, causing unimaginable suffering before death finally came. You can't do this, Lieutenant Tanaka shouted, struggling against her restraints. We're diplomats. We have immunity. You forfeited that immunity when you engaged in espionage. Cathrell replied. This is murder, Dr. Martinez said, his voice breaking. History will judge you for this. History is written by those who survive. Cathrell said simply. They were taken to a public execution chamber, a massive arena that could accommodate thousands of observers. The broadcast would reach every assembly world simultaneously. A lesson in what happened to those who challenged the established order. Sarah and her 17 colleagues were placed on individual platforms in the center of the arena. Energy field restraints held them immobile while the dissolution apparatus was activated around each platform. As the first waves of molecular disruption began to ripple through her body, Sarah Chen looked up at the cameras broadcasting her death across the galaxy. She thought of Earth, of her sister Margaret, who would be watching this, of the billions of humans who had trusted her to represent them. The pain began, a sensation of being unmade atom by atom. And Sarah did the only thing she could. She refused to scream. She wouldn't give Cathrell and the Assembly the satisfaction of seeing humanity broken around her. Her team followed her example for 3 hours. They endured agony beyond description, their bodies slowly unraveling, while the galaxy watched when Commander Sarah Chen finally died. Her last thought was a prayer that Earth would not let their sacrifice be in vain. In a command center on Earth, General Marcus Webb watched the broadcast with tears streaming down his face around him. The entire United Earth Defense Force leadership sat in stunned silence when it finally ended. Webb stood slowly. The broadcast of Commander Chen's execution reached Earth 17 hours after it occurred. Transmitted through the Assembly's official channels as what they called an educational demonstration of justice by the time the message arrived. Every major government on Earth already knew what had happened through their own intelligence networks. The reaction was immediate and apocalyptic in Beijing. Protesters stormed government buildings demanding action in New York. Millions gathered in Times Square, their grief transforming into rage as the hours passed in Mumbai, São Paulo, Lagos, and every other major city across the globe. The same scene repeated, humanity united in its fury and sorrow. The footage was played on every screen, every device. Every surface capable of displaying an image, the world watched as Sarah Chen and 17 of Earth's finest minds died slowly, their bodies dissolving molecule by molecule while alien. Judges looked on with cold indifference, the public outrage. Forced governments that had preached patience and diplomacy into an impossible corner prime minister. Okonkwo of the African Union addressed her parliament with tears in her eyes. They murdered our ambassadors. They tortured them to death while broadcasting it as entertainment. And now they dare to tell us we must remain confined to our solar system like children who have misbehaved in Geneva? The United Nations Security Council convened an emergency session that would last 3 days without break. Chamber was packed with representatives from every nation, every autonomous region, every significant political entity on Earth. Secretary General Dmitry Volkov called the session to order. His normally steady voice shaking with emotion. We face a decision that will define humanity's future for generations to come. He began, do we accept this injustice? Swallow our rage and hope that time will heal these wounds? Or do we respond with force and risk everything we have built? The debate was fierce and impassioned. Some argued for restraint, warning that humanity could not possibly win a war against an alliance of 47 spacefaring civilizations. We are one world against a galaxy, argued the representative from the European Federation. Any military action would be suicide, others demanded. Immediate retaliation regardless of the cost if we do not respond to this atrocity. We signal to the entire universe that human lives are worthless, countered the North American Union ambassador. We would be inviting further aggression on the second day of deliberations. General Marcus Webb was called to present a classified military briefing. Webb was a career soldier who had risen through the ranks to command Earth's consolidated defense force, a unified military structure that had been created specifically to prepare for potential hostile contact with alien civilizations. He was a tall man with iron gray hair and the bearing of someone who had seen combat and understood its cost. Webb stepped to the podium and activated a holographic display that filled the center of the chamber. For the past 30 years, while our diplomats pursued peaceful integration into galactic society, the Defense Force has been preparing for the possibility that peace might fail. He began, what I'm about to show you is classified at the highest level. Knowledge of these programs has been restricted to fewer than 100 individuals globally. The holographic display showed technical specifications for weapon systems that made several council members gasp. When we first encountered the Galactic Assembly, we immediately began analyzing their technology, their ship designs, their weapons, and their tactical doctrines. Webb continued, what we discovered was both encouraging and disturbing. He pulled up comparison charts, showing human and alien technologies side by side. The assembly species possess technology that is in many ways superior to ours. Their ships are faster, their energy generation more efficient, their materials science more advanced. However, they also possess a critical weakness. Webb let the pause stretch. Ensuring he had everyone's complete attention, they'd have grown complacent. Their technology advances slowly, bound by tradition, bureaucracy, and a conservative approach to innovation that prioritizes stability over progress. He brought up footage of assembly military exercises, showing their fleet movements and combat tactics. Their military doctrines haven't meaningfully changed in thousands of years. They fight according to established rules of engagement, conventions on weaponry, and cultural expectations of honorable combat. You're saying they're predictable, Volkov observed. I'm saying they've forgotten what war actually means. Webb replied, they've had peace for so long that they've turned warfare into a ritualized sport with rules and boundaries. Meanwhile, humanity has been refining the art of killing each other for our entire history. He pulled up new displays showing human weapon systems. Our scientists have developed weapons the Assembly has never conceived of because they violate their cultural sensibilities. Quantum-entangled kill switches that can disable enemy systems instantaneously across light years. Nanite swarms programmed to consume specific materials designed to eat through ship hulls like acid. Kinetic weapons accelerated to 98% of light speed. Essentially relativistic missiles that release energy equivalent to nuclear weapons on impact. The council members stared at the displays with a mixture of awe and horror, and then there's Project Casimir. Webb said quietly, the holographic display showed what appeared to be a relatively small device. No larger than a shuttlecraft, this is a Casimir bomb. It exploits quantum vacuum fluctuations to create localized tears in spacetime. In practical terms, it can make a section of space simply cease to exist. Everything within the affected radius ships, stations, even planets would be erased. That's a doomsday weapon, breathed the Asian Coalition representative. Yes, Webb agreed. We have 12 of them. The chamber fell silent. If we go to war, we will win, Webb said, with absolute certainty, not because we're stronger or more advanced, but because we're willing to do what they're not. We'll fight dirty, we'll break their rules, and we'll use every advantage our violent history has taught us. At what cost? Asked the Pacific Alliance delegate. Significant. Webb admitted. We'll lose ships. We'll lose lives. War is always costly, but the alternative is to accept that humanity can be murdered with impunity, that we are lesser beings who must bow to the whims of ancient empires on the third day. Margaret Chen requested permission to address the council. She was Sarah's younger sister, a teacher from Vancouver who had watched her sibling die on screens around the world. Council granted her request. Margaret stood at the podium without notes, her hands gripping the edges to keep them from shaking. My sister believed in peace, she began. Her voice soft but clear. She believed in diplomacy and bridge building. She spent 6 months on that station trying to make the galaxy better, trying to help species who were being oppressed by the same powers that murdered her. Tears flowed freely down her face. But she didn't wipe them away. Sarah died in agony while the galaxy watched. She and 17 others were tortured to death for the crime of believing that justice should apply equally to everyone. And now we're being asked whether we should respond or turn the other cheek. She paused, taking a shaky breath. I want peace. I want the universe my sister believed in, where different species work together and learn from each other, but that universe doesn't exist. The Galactic Assembly is built on oppression and maintained through fear. Margaret looked directly into the cameras, broadcasting her testimony around the world. If we do nothing, Sarah's death means nothing. Every human who dies in space from this day forward will be seen as acceptable collateral because we established that human lives don't matter enough to fight for her. The voice grew stronger. My sister died trying to make the galaxy better. The least we can do is make sure the monsters who killed her face justice. The chamber erupted in applause that lasted for several minutes when the final vote came. It was unanimous. The United Nations Security Council authorized operation, reckoning a full military response against the Galactic Assembly with the stated objectives of dismantling the corrupt power structure, bringing those responsible for the execution of the human delegation to justice, and establishing a new galactic order based on principles of equality and fairness. The authorization came with strict rules of engagement. Civilian populations were to be protected at all costs. Only military and governmental targets were authorized. And any species that withdrew from the assembly would be granted immunity from attack. We are not going to war for vengeance. Secretary General Volkov announced to the world, we are going to war for justice. We will show the galaxy that humanity fights not to conquer or destroy, but to defend the principles of dignity and fairness for all sentient beings within 48 hours? Earth's mobilization was complete. 300 warships, including every vessel in the Defense Force inventory, plus hastily militarized commercial ships. Assembled in orbit around the moon, every ship bore black armbands on their hulls, each inscribed with the names of the executed envoys. Admiral Patricia Okonkwo, who had been given command of the Armada, broadcast a message to the fleet before they departed: "We carry the hopes of 6 billion people and the memory of 18 heroes." She said. The Shanti blockade fleet hung in space at the edge of Earth's solar system, 150 warships arranged in a formation that had been used successfully for 3,000 years. Fleet Commander Zarthok watched the sensor displays with satisfaction, certain that the humans would see the overwhelming force arrayed against them and choose surrender over suicide. "Commander, we're detecting multiple warp signatures." His sensor officer reported the human fleet is approaching how many vessels? Zarthok asked. "Approximately 300. Sir." Zarthok's mandibles clicked in what passed for laughter among his species. "They're sending everything they have." "This will be over quickly, sir." "The human fleet is not following standard approach protocols." The tactical officer observed. "They're coming in scattered. No formation coherence primitives," Zarthok muttered. "They don't even understand basic fleet tactics." "Prepare to broadcast surrender terms on all frequencies." The human fleet dropped out of warp in a chaotic spread across thousands of kilometers. Exactly as the Shanti had observed. What Zarthok didn't realize was that this chaos was precisely calculated. Admiral Okonkwo stood on the bridge of her flagship, the UNSS Retribution, watching as her fleet executed the opening moves of a battle plan that had been refined through thousands of simulations. "All ships, execute pattern Delta 7. She ordered calmly, and someone broadcast our response to their surrender demands. A communications officer activated the transmission, and Admiral Okonkwo's voice carried across all frequencies. "This is Admiral Patricia Okonkwo of the United Earth Defense Force to the Shanti blockade fleet. You have been judged complicit in the murder of 18 human diplomats. Your surrender will be accepted. But understand this, we are not here to negotiate." She paused. "For effect, you wanted to see what humanity is capable of. Now you'll learn what we've always known about ourselves. We are very, very good at killing." The transmission cut off, and across the scattered human fleet, weapon systems came online. The Shanti fleet began moving into standard engagement formation, their ships forming up into disciplined lines that would allow for coordinated fire and mutual defense. They had used this formation against every opponent for millennia, and it had never failed. Then the humans opened fire. And Fleet Commander Zarthok realized with horror that nothing he knew about warfare applied. The first wave wasn't energy weapons or missiles. It was something the Shanti sensors couldn't even properly classify. Millions of microscopic objects swept across the Shanti fleets at relativistic speeds, each one a kinetic kill vehicle, no larger than a grain of sand but moving at 98% of light speed. When they struck the Shanti shields, the impact released energy equivalent to small nuclear detonation shields, designed to disperse energy beams and deflect physical missiles. Were overwhelmed instantly by the sheer kinetic force. Holes appeared in the defensive screens, and through those holes came the second wavenite swarms, trillions of microscopic machines programmed with a single purpose: consume the hull materials of Shanti vessels. They spread across ship surfaces like a plague, eating through armor plating that had been designed to withstand conventional weapons alarms. Screamed across the Shanti fleet as hull breaches appeared seemingly out of nowhere. "What are they using?" Zarthok shouted at his tactical officer. "Unknown, sir. Our defenses aren't configured for this type of attack." "Reconfigure them then." "Sir, it would take hours to reprogram the defensive grids the human fleet wasn't giving them." Hours having disrupted the Shanti formation, human ships dove into close-range combat, ignoring every established protocol about proper engagement. Distancement doctrine called for ships to maintain minimum safe spacing to allow for coordinated fire and prevent collateral damage. Human ships wove between Shanti vessels at ranges so close that the larger ships couldn't target them without risking hitting their own. Fleet-hand, the humans used weapons that violated every galactic convention on civilized warfare. They deployed mines that didn't show up on sensors until they detonated. They launched what appeared to be escape pods that were actually kamikaze drones packed with antimatter. They broadcasted surrender signals from damaged ships, then fired on any vessel that approached to accept the surrender. They're not fighting honorably. Zarthox's second officer protested, shock evident in his voice. They're fighting to win. Zarthok corrected, grimly returned fire. All ships abandon formation protocols and engage at will. But abandoning their disciplined formation only made things worse. The Shanti captains, trained for thousands of years in formal combat doctrines, didn't know how to fight without structure. They bunched together for mutual support. Creating target-rich environments, they followed their instincts to protect damaged vessels. Walking into obvious traps, they broadcast their tactical movements on standard military channels, not realizing that human electronic warfare suites were intercepting and decoding everything the humans fought like a pack of wolves, bringing down much larger prey, darting in to strike weak points. Then retreating, before the enemy could respond effectively, they used psychological warfare, broadcasting footage of the executed human delegation on all channels, making sure every Shanti crew member knew exactly why they were dying. They exploited every weakness in Shanti technology and tactics with a precision that spoke to decades of careful study and preparation. 30 minutes into the battle, the Shanti fleet had lost 40 vessels an hour. They had lost 90. Fleet Commander Zarthok watched his tactical display with growing disbelief as his superior force was systematically dismantled by an enemy that fought without honor, without mercy, and without any regard for the established rules of warfare. Broadcast retreat signal. He finally ordered all ships withdraw too. The retribution appeared on his display. Having cut through the Shanti formation like a blade admiral, Okonkwo's face filled his communication screen. No retreat. She said simply, no surrender. You taught us that mercy is weakness. Now you'll learn what happens when humans take that lesson to heart. The Retribution's main batteries fired, and Zarthok's flagship disintegrated in a ball of plasma. The battle lasted 6 hours total. When it ended, not a single Shanti vessel remained intact. Some had been destroyed outright. Others so badly damaged that their crews abandoned ship. The human fleet had lost 42 vessels, with another 70 sustaining various degrees of damage. Was a costly victory, but the strategic implications were staggering. Admiral Okonkwo broadcast her after-action report to Earth, and to every listening assembly world. The blockade has been broken. She announced to the Galactic Assembly, this was your first lesson. You wanted to confine humanity to our solar system. You wanted to demonstrate your power over us. Instead, you've learned that human ingenuity and determination cannot be contained. She paused, letting her words sink in across the galaxy to the younger species of the Assembly. We fight not for conquest, but for justice. Any civilization that withdraws from the Assembly will be granted immunity from attack. We are not your enemies unless you choose to make us so to the founding species. You murdered innocent diplomats. You broadcast their deaths as entertainment. Now you will face the consequences. We are coming for you, and we will not stop until every individual responsible for this atrocity is faced. Just as the human fleet regrouped and split into smaller strike groups, each assigned to specific targets across assembly space, their objectives had been carefully selected. Military installations, government facilities, resource depots, and communication hubs. Every target was purely military or governmental before each attack. The human forces broadcast warnings giving civilians time to evacuate. Then they struck with overwhelming force. The Morantine logistics hub at Kepler 442 was hit by a human strike group that destroyed the military garrison and government complex while carefully avoiding the civilian sectors. The Assembly's regional military headquarters at Tau Ceti fell to a precision strike that eliminated command and control capabilities without touching the inhabited areas of the system. The Shanti weapons foundry orbiting Gliese 832 was reduced to debris, but not before every civilian worker had been evacuated. With each victory, the message became clearer. humanity could destroy military targets with impunity, but chose to minimize civilian casualties. It was psychological warfare on a grand scale, the Assembly's member species, many of whom had been coerced into joining and had chafed under the founding species' dominance for centuries, began to take note. The Velic Confederation was the first to act. Ambassador Throck, the same being who had tried to warn Commander Chen of the danger she was in, appeared on all assembly channels with a stunning announcement: the Velic Confederation hereby withdraws from the Galactic Assembly effective. Immediately, he declared, for too long we have been complicit in a corrupt system that enriches the powerful at the expense of the vulnerable. Humanity has shown us that resistance is possible, that justice can be more than an empty word. We stand with Earth within days. 12 more species announced their withdrawal from the Assembly. They were mostly mid-tier civilizations that had long been frustrated by the founding species. Monopolies and restrictions, the Assembly began to fracture. The Assembly's central station hung in space like a jewel, a massive construct that had taken 10,000 years to build and housed over 3 billion beings from hundreds of species. It was the governmental heart of galactic civilization, the place where laws were made and justice theoretically administered. Was also where Commander Sarah Chen had General Marcus Webb stood on the observation deck of his command ship, the Un's Reckoning, and studied the station through the reinforced viewport. He had personally requested command of the final assault, had argued with Admiral Okonkwo for the honor of leading humanity's strike force. Sir, we're detecting massive energy signatures from the station. His tactical officer reported the Shanti are bringing up their reserve fleet. Webb had expected this intelligence suggested the Shanti had kept their most powerful vessels in reserve, ancient dreadnoughts that had been built during their empire's golden age millennia ago. Were ships from an era when the Shanti had been conquerors rather than administrators. Vessels designed for total warfare. How many? Webb asked calmly. 86 capital ships, 340 support vessels. Energy readings suggest weapon systems we haven't encountered before. They're pulling out everything they've saved for a rainy day, Webb observed. Unfortunate for them that we brought an umbrella. His crew chuckled nervously at the gallows humor. The human fleet numbered 258 vessels. After the previous engagements, they were outnumbered and facing weapons, technology that might be superior to anything they had yet encountered. But Webb had one advantage: the Shanti didn't. He was willing to do absolutely anything to win all ships. Execute the Rubicon Protocol, he ordered. The Rubicon Protocol was humanity's final contingency plan, the one they had hoped never to use. Every ship in the fleet activated quantum-entangled systems that linked them directly to Earth's military command network, creating a real-time tactical coordination that was impossible to achieve through conventional faster-than-light communication. The human fleet became, in essence, a single organism with 258 bodies, able to respond to threats and opportunities instantly. The Shanti fleet moved to engage in their traditional formation, a defensive sphere, designed to provide overlapping fields of fire and mutual support. It was a formation that had held against every assault for 3,000 years. The humans ignored it completely. Instead of attacking the formation directly, human ships deployed what they called reality anchors, devices that created localized disruptions in subspace, making it impossible to use warp drives or certain types of energy weapons in the affected areas. Anchors were positioned to create a cage around the Shanti formation, forcing them to fight in normal space where human tactical coordination gave them an advantage. Then came the second surprise from deep in the human fleet's formation. 12 ships of unusual design moved forward. They were the Casimir carriers, each one housing a single doomsday weapon. Ambassador Catherall Webb broadcast on all frequencies. This is General Marcus Webb of the United Earth Defense Force. I am authorized to offer terms of surrender exactly once on the bridge of his flagship. Catherall stared at the display showing the approaching human fleet. Humans do not dictate terms to the Shanti, he snarled. Then let me be clear about what happens next, Webb continued, his voice cold. Those 12 ships you're seeing on your sensors each carry a weapon capable of erasing everything in a 10,000-kilometer radius from existence. We have positioned them to create overlapping fields of effect that would destroy your entire fleet. The assembly station and everything in this system, he paused to let that sink in. We would prefer not to use them. Not because we lack the will, but because 3 billion civilians live on that station. So I'm offering you a choice surrender now. Face trial for your crimes and allow us to reform the assembly peacefully. Or refuse and watch as we demonstrate that humanity is willing to burn down the entire corrupt edifice you've built. Your bluffing, Cathrall said, but his voice carried uncertainty. We're not. Webb replied simply, you based your entire strategy on the belief that humans value life too much to make hard choices. You were wrong. We value justice more than life. Including our own, he gestured to his tactical officer, who activated one of the Casimir devices on minimum power. A sphere of space, 10 kilometers in radius, simply ceased to exist. Taking 3 Shanti support vessels with it, the effect was visible as a perfect void that seemed to swallow light itself before normal. Space collapsed back into the vacuum that was a demonstration at 0.01% power. Webb said you have 5 minutes to decide. The Shanti fleet held formation. And for a moment, Webb thought Cathrall's pride would doom them all then. Unexpectedly, a different voice came over the communication channel. General Webb. This is the Eternal Scholar. The ancient being said, I am ordering the Shanti fleet to stand down. Ambassador Cathrall no longer speaks for the High Council. You have no authority over me. Cathrall roared, I speak with the authority of 17,000 cycles of accumulated wisdom. The scholar replied, and I say, this madness ends now. The Shanti fleet will lower its shields and deactivate weapon systems immediately. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, one by one, ships in the Shanti formation began powering down their weapons. Not all of them Cathrall's flagship, and perhaps 30 other vessels maintained combat readiness, but enough that the tide had clearly turned. Ambassador Cathrall, your own people have abandoned you, Webb observed. Stand down before more beings die needlessly. Cathrall's response was to open fire his flagship's main batteries. Weapons powerful enough to crack planets unleashed devastating salvos at the human fleet. The attack caught several human vessels unprepared, destroying 4 ships instantly and badly damaging a dozen others. Return fire. Webb ordered without hesitation, all ships. Eliminate Cathrall's flagship and any vessel that continues to fight. The battle that followed was brief, but catastrophic. Cathrall's loyalists fought with suicidal determination. Knowing they faced execution for their crimes if captured, the human fleet, no longer constrained by the need to offer quarter to those who had surrendered, used every weapon in their arsenal. The void of space lit up with weapons fire as ancient Shanti dreadnoughts traded blows with human warships one by one. The Shanti vessels fell when it was over. 33 ships had been destroyed, including Cathrall's flagship. The remaining Shanti fleet had indeed surrendered, their crews broadcasting their willingness to face whatever justice the humans demanded. Webb surveyed the destruction with no satisfaction. Secure the assembly station, he ordered. Medical teams prepare to provide humanitarian assistance to the civilian population. And someone find Ambassador Cathrall's escape pod. No, he didn't go down with his ship. They found Cathrall 3 hours later, drifting in an unmarked pod trying to reach the edge of the system when he was brought aboard the Reckoning. The ancient Shanti ambassador seemed to have aged centuries. You've destroyed everything, he said bitterly. We've destroyed a corrupt system. Webb corrected, there's a difference. Over the following weeks, human forces secured the assembly station and began the process of establishing order at the civilian population. Terrified at first, gradually realized that the humans meant them no harm. Medical supplies, food, and essential services were all maintained or improved. The Eternal Scholar worked with Webb to establish an interim government and to plan trials for those responsible for the execution of the human delegation. The TRIALS were broadcast across the galaxy, conducted with meticulous attention to due process and fairness. Every accused individual was provided with legal representation and the opportunity to present a defensive evidence. Was carefully examined and cross-examined it. Was everything the human's own trial had not been ambassador? Catherall and the 4 other judges who had sentenced Commander Chen and her team were found guilty of murder, fabrication of evidence, and crimes against sentient beings. Their sentence was announced by a tribunal composed of representatives from multiple species, including humans, Velik, Morantine, and even one Shanti, who had opposed Catherall's actions for your crimes. You are sentenced to death by the same method you employed against the human delegation. The tribunal declared you will face dissolution, not as punishment alone, but as a demonstration that justice applies equally to all. When Catherall was placed on the execution platform, he looked up at the cameras broadcasting his death across the galaxy and finally seemed to understand. What he had done, I thought I was protecting civilization, he said quietly instead. I became the thing I feared most, barbarian. Cloaked in the language of law, his execution took 3 hours. Exactly as Commander Chen's hadn't liked Chen, Catherall screamed when it was over. General Webb addressed the galaxy from the assembly station. What we have witnessed today was not vengeance. He said it was justice. The same justice that should have been applied to Commander Chen and her colleagues. The same justice that should have been available to every species in the assembly, but was reserved only for the powerful. He gestured to the space around him where representatives from dozens of species had gathered.